All right, cool. So so for lecture today, I'm gonna focus on forms. So Django forms. So we'll start from scratch and we'll build a very simple application, which will serve up, a list of ads. It doesn't really matter. It'll be ads for this example, but it doesn't matter what it is. So it's like the list view. I go to whatever /ads and I see all of the ads that are in the system. And then there's going to be another route which is going to handle forms. So I'll go to like create a new ad. And when I first go there, I'll get a form and I fill in the form. And then my view logic will handle parsing that form, pulling out all the data, and then interacting with the database to create a new record in the database. And we've used forms. We've done it in regular old boring HTML. Django has a few different options. So I just want to say in general, Django's been around for quite a while. And they usually, at this point, there's like 3 or 4 ways to do any given thing. So if you've had this issue looking through documentation, yeah, it's just something to be aware of. It's got its pluses and minuses, but there's usually many ways to do the same thing. Some of them are very like, Django does like almost all the work for you, or it's just like totally magic. And then you can operate at a much lower level as well. All right, so we'll get started. So I want to create a Django application. So first I'm going to create a virtual environment because I'm going to need to install Django. So Python -m then. And this can be called, I almost always call it ven, but this can be called whatever you want. And I'm going to activate it, source. And once I have that, I'm going to install Django. So pip install Django. And by default, it'll just grab the latest, but you can also specify specific versions. I don't have a requirements.txt or anything else. So this should be fine. All right, so once I have that, I have Django installed. I can use Django to basically bootstrap myself. I can get all of the skeleton of a Django app created by running command. So Django admin start project, and I will call this Craigslist. Okay, and then I'm gonna cd into this project. So project is the top level thing, and project gives us a bunch of things. This manage.py, which we use but really don't need to look at. What we do use is settings, and I'm going to so here are the installed apps. We don't have anything, but shortly we'll create our own apps. So we'll have to add our app to this list. And then the databases. I'm just going to use the default SQLite database, but it's very easy to use Postgres, and we'll use Postgres later. And then there's some other things which you mostly don't need to worry about, but we can mess around with a little bit. So all this middleware stuff, we get some sensible defaults for password authorization, for example, and then languages and blah, blah, blah. So we don't need to worry about all that stuff. And then URLs. So this is going to be this URLs at this level, the top level URLs file is basically going to be our router. So you make a request and it's going to say, where should I hand off that request to? And by default, it starts with this built-in admin app. And so it comes with this /admin thing for free. So we'll take a look at that as well. All right, so I have my project. So now I'm going to create my app. So Django admin start app. So a project can have many apps, and we'll call this ads. All right, so I do that. I get this new folder, which is slightly different. It's got it's got views, which is going to hold the main logic. So you're going to make a request to the to the server. You make a request. The request gets parsed by this top level URLs first, and we'll end up handing it off. We haven't created it yet, but we'll end up creating another URLs file for ads. So we can further hand that off. And then ultimately, we'll write some function here for now, but you can also write classes that will handle that incoming request, and it will do whatever logic it needs to do, make requests to the database, do validation, check stuff, add stuff, and then ultimately it's going to spit out a response. So some kind of HTTP response, which will get set. Okay, so I've got my ads. So I've created a new app here. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my settings. Installed apps. So ads, that will work. And I'm just going to go ahead and run the migrations. I haven't created any of my own models yet, but I'm just going to run it anyway, so I can get all the default stuff going. And you do that with Python manage.py, and then make migrations. So the usual is make migrations and then migrate. The first time you don't really need to do make migrations, but it's fine. We'll do that. No changes detected. And then we'll do migrate. So a whole bunch of stuff initially gets run. And then we should be able to run the server. So we don't have anything built, but we should be able to run the server. So Python manage.py run server. We'll come over here, and here's the default starting page. So at the very least, we know that this is working. We haven't broken anything yet. We can also so here's the kind of root level. But if you look at the top level URLs, the project URLs, there's a /admin. So our app comes built in expecting to handle /admin. What happens when we go there? We get this login page. Now we haven't dealt with this yet. We'll take a look at this. It's just a convenience basically. But in order to log in, we'll need to create a super user. So, yeah, I'll just split it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a super user. And a super user is going to be the admin, basically, for the site. So Python manage.py create super user. And now I'm going to basically fill out this form. I'm going to do, very insecure, easy stuff just to make it easy while I'm developing. So username, email address, blank, password. So this is a very bad password, but I'm going to overwrite that. And now I've created this user, so I should be able to log in now. And that worked. So now I can actually log in here. And from here, by default, I can do a few things. We're not going to worry about groups, but I can create more users. So I can see that I can look at the information. This is the super user that I created on the terminal there. So username, password. So we obviously don't store raw passwords. And then a bunch of other information about the user. So I can create another user. And then, so notice all of these password restrictions. Password can't be too similar to other personal information, must contain at least 8 characters, and so on. So if we go back to the settings and look at that, we can see that those correspond to this: user attribute similarity validator, minimum length validator, commonly used password, common password validator. So we can use these, we can add our own, we can, it's just like, just like we've done, you can have all kinds of custom validators, we can turn stuff off. So I'm going to turn off, I'll turn off these two. Let's see what that does if I refresh this. So those other two went away. So now hopefully I can do something very simple. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's see if that works. Password is too common. Let me turn off this other validator. Maybe that accepted it. Let me see. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I'm going to delete this guy and then see. All right, I'm gonna try that again. I'm gonna add a user, U2. So I should be able to just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. See if that works. And it does work. So I mean, there's no real reason for you. I'm just being lazy. There's no reason to really turn off the default settings, but everything is tweakable here. All right. So now let's go to our application. So we've got the basic thing working. We have a super user, that's fine. So now let's actually start creating this. So there's about 10 different things we need to do to get something working. So the order you do it in doesn't really matter, but I'll start with the models. So this is going to be an application about ads. So we're going to need an ad. And we do that with class add, and that will extend models dot model. And then we need our columns. So we can have we'll have title models dot car field, and then you have to have a max length. So I'll just pick something random, and then text equals models dot text field, and I'll have an email. Okay, so I think that'll be good enough for now. So now we have this model, but it's not connected to anything else. So if we wanted to create new model instances or new ad instances, or otherwise known as new rows in our database, then we could go into the shell and then execute commands. We could also just go into like a regular SQL. Since our database is right here, we could actually use another tool like this DB browser, go in there, execute some insert statements and create a database, and that would be available to our application. We could also go into Django shell and use the Django ORM to do that, to insert new records. We can also go into the admin and do the same thing. So in order to do that, by default, the admin is only going to be hooked up to handle this default stuff like users and groups. But we can add our model to the admin by going right here. So this is the app, so ads, the admin.py. And we're just going to basically tell the admin site to start paying attention to our model. So I'm going to import the model. So from dot models, import add. And then in here, I'm going to do admin dot site dot register. This is just something you would look up. And then I pass it add. So once I do that, I should be able to go back here. And now I have this new ads thing. So I can click on this. Let's see. So I have an error here. So I tried to go in the admin panel and add a new ad. And I get this maybe kind of cryptic error, operational error, no such table. First off, the table is called ads underscore ad. Can anyone guess as to why it's
migrations first, or make migrations migrate?
Yes, yeah. So what happened was I created a new model, but I didn't update my database. So my database doesn't actually know about this model yet. My application knows about it. The Django application knows about this model, but my database does not. So I'm gonna have to fix that. I'm gonna have to basically run all of the table create statements here. So we'll do that. So we go Python manage.py make migrations. And because there's something new, this shows up. And that also shows up right here, which we don't really need to worry about. And then I'm going to run migrate. So Python manage.py migrate. And I will actually apply those changes. So now my database has actually been changed. If I go back here, I should not get an error. So I'm going to go ahead and add an ad. And the title would be add title 1 and john@doe.com. So I have something, but this is not very helpful. Add object 1, and if I create another one, I can say add 2 and another email. Do the same guy again. So I can have a bunch of them, but still this is not very human readable. So is there any way to override this representation of a model?
Would we need to add a string method on that model?
Exactly. Yeah. So right now, Django is using the default string representation right here. And that's not useful to us, so we can make something that is useful to us. So def, and we can put whatever we want here. Return, I'll just do result.title. We save this. I can refresh the admin page, and now all of a sudden I can see, I guess, the wrong kind of ad here. Okay. So this is another way where you can add, if you want to add some dummy data or whatever to get started. This is another. So there's like 3 ways of doing that. Okay, cool. So so now we have our model working, and we have some actual dummy data, so we should be able to see something. But we need to hook everything up. So we don't have a route, we don't have a view that's going to actually get that information and display it for us. So I'll just start with the view. So I've created the model, and now I want to create the view. So def, we'll call this list ads. And views in Django are going to get a request parameter by default. So all of these view methods that I write are going to have a request they're all going to come with that. So Django is going to supply that. And we can, I think you guys have done an exercise where you kind of investigate what's inside of that request object, but all kinds of useful stuff. So what happens is, I'm imagining someone goes to our application, they go to /ads, and then they should see a list of ads. They should get an HTML document that has a list of all the ads in it. So I know that I'm going to have to get all those ads. Unfortunately, we have a way to do that. So I'll have to import my model. So from .models import add. And I can actually grab all of the ads that are currently in the database. So ads, I'll call all ads equals add dot objects dot all. So this should give me a query set, which is basically a list of rows or ads or add objects. Okay, and then once I have that, I guess for now, let's see. Yeah. Yeah, this is, let me see how we should do this. Yeah, it's always tough when thinking about the order you should do this in, because nothing will really work until everything is working. But we'll just keep going here. So I'm going to grab all the ads, and then I'm going to need to return. So all of these view methods or view functions, they take a request and they're going to have to return a Django HTTP response object. And if I look here, this might be hard to read, but you can see the signature, the function signature here. Let me move this. So it's a function render. It takes a request, which you can see, which is an HTTP request object. So that's a Django object, and it returns at the very end. Right here, you can see this little arrow. This means returns, and then HTTP response. So it returns, also in the description, returns an HTTP response. We can take a look at it. So I'll just go ahead and jump in there and take a look at it. So there's some other stuff which we don't need to worry about, but it's going to take a request for sure. And it returns an HTTP response object. So this render method is going to take in a request, a template name, and optionally some context. So let's just take a look at the HTTP response. This is a class which extends from HTTP response. So we could play this game. This is how code bases work. You end up jumping around from thing to thing and trying to remember how everything works. So this is an HTTP response class with the string as content, blah, blah, blah. So you can take a look at some of this stuff if you want to, or if you just want to practice jumping around. But we don't have to know all those details. We just have this convenient method that we have to use, and it's going to take three things. So return, render. It's going to take the request objects. We're just going to pass that along, and then it's going to take a template name. And template name is just going to be a relative path to an HTML document. We haven't written that yet, but we will. So the convention would be to just like whatever the app is, in our case ads, / and then whatever we want to call it. So I'll call it list.html. And we can optionally pass it some context. And context basically just means it's stuff that's going to get filled in the template. So if we want to send an HTML document with all of the ads, but we don't know in advance what those ads are or how many there are going to be or anything like that, we want to make that dynamic. So we want this HTML document to be generic, but able to handle any number of ads. So we'll have to use templating to do that. In the meantime, we'll also pass it a context object, because this is the information that's going to get inserted into the template. So all these ads. So ads, all ads. All right, so let's go ahead and create this. Does anyone have any questions so far? There's a lot of like very tedious steps involved here. Does anyone have any questions or like any clarification at this point?
Yeah, I had to step away for a second whenever you were signing into the admin portal. If you don't mind backtracking just a tad and just going back over how you created that first user to log into the admin portal.
Yeah. So in order to create, so in order to use the admin portal with our model, we have to register the model. But before you do that, to just log in, you have to create a super user.
Okay.
So you can do that Python manage.py, and then create super user, all one word. And then it's just going to ask you some questions, and then you should supply a username and password. And once you do that, then you should just be able to go to /admin and enter those credentials, username and password, and log in.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. So we have our view now, at least this method function. But this, as part of what we're generating, we need to have an HTML document. So you have to create that. So in ads, the convention for this is to create a folder called templates. And then within that templates folder, you create another folder which has the same name as the app. So it's a bit strange, but ads. And then within this folder is where we'll actually create this list.html. So list.html. So we have our app, which is ads, and then in there we have a templates folder, and in the templates folder we have in the ads folder, and then in there we have our HTML document. So you can modify that, but that's how Django that's where Django is going to look by default. All right, so I'm just going to create a for now. Let's just not worry about the templating stuff. So I'm just going to do H1 all ads. Okay, so I have this. I'm going to return this HTML document with some stuff which I'm not actually using yet, but it's there when we do use it. So I've got my model, I got the back end done. Now I have this view done, which is kind of like the middle layer, which is going to do all the logic. Now we have to add the routing. So a request has to come in and has to ultimately get sent to this view function. So because the entry point for all this stuff is going to be the project URLs, what we're going to do is we're going to say anything that comes into whatever route we decide, we're going to hand it off somewhere else. So path. So this could be anything. I'm just going to call it ads. So anything that comes in ads, I'm going to hand off. And I'm going to add this other thing, include. And include, it's going to take a string. So this will be ads.urls. So it might not be obvious what this is doing right now, but basically what we're saying is, if I go to whatever /admin, Django is automatically handling that. Did I turn this off? Yeah. Django's automatically handling it. So what I'm doing is I want to add a new route called ads, and if I do that, then I want to hand it off to this application, and it's expecting a URLs file in ads, which doesn't exist yet, so I have to create that. So URLs.py, and then in here, it'll be very similar to this one. So I'll just copy this. But we're not gonna do that. From here, we're actually going to call one of our view functions. So we take in a request, it goes to the top level URLs, then gets handed off over to this URLs, and then from here we want to call one of the views, basically. And we just have one right now. So path. So I'll call this / list. And we'll see how this all works in a second. But so now I need to pass it the views that I want. So from .views import, and what did I call this? List ads. List ads. So that should be good enough for now. I just restarted the server to get rid of that error. And now if I go, so again, starting at the very top level, if I go to, whatever port 8080, whatever it's running on, 8000 / ads, this is going to go, oh, I'm going to route you over to here. So let's go to the ads URLs, which is right here. And then anything that's /ads / list is going to get picked up. It's going to get basically this particular view function is going to get called for that. So we're just matching methods to requests. Now if I go here, I won't go to admin, I'll go to ads. So I get a page not found because there is no just ads. I could create something like that, but we haven't created it yet. So there is an ads /ads /list, but there isn't just a /ads. So it's telling me that here. So I'm going to go to /ads /list. And looks like I have an extra / or something. So let me get rid of this. I'll try that again. And now that actually works. So I had an extra / here, which I shouldn't have had. But now this is being routed properly. So the Django URLs is parsing this, and it's saying, oh, you want to go to /ads? Well, if you want to go to /ads, I'm going to hand you off to this URLs right over here. And then this URL is going to assume that localhost 8000 /ads. It's basically going to assume that already exists, and it's going to say, okay, from there on, what do I need to look at? And here we just have one, so it's list. So it's just going to match on list, and because there's a match, it can actually return something. So because there's a match, it's going to end up calling this list ads, which we've written right here, which is going to go to the database and grab all of these ad objects, and then it's going to take this context object, inject it into this HTML, which we've just written, and then return that. So now we want to hook up this part. So we have the HTML. The HTML is being returned and rendered, but it doesn't have our ads in it. So we have to, from within our HTML, we need to make sure we're using these ads. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do ads. Not getting any color coding here, so I'm a little suspicious, but we'll see if that works. Okay. Well, that does work. It's not very pretty, but we got something. So here, this is just the kind of raw data that we're getting back, the query set right here. So in order to make this more useful, we don't want to just return a big blob. I mean, if this were a JSON server or something, you could do that, but we're, this is the presentation layer, so we have to actually make something nice. So what we can do is we can loop over, because this is a list. Basically, the query set is a list. You can iterate over it, and then we can create chunks of HTML based on that. So this should for add in ads, and the reason that this knows about ads is because that's what we called it here. That's the key. So we could call this anything, but it's just called ads. But that's what this corresponds to. So we have a for loop, so we're gonna loop over that stuff, and I'm gonna make sure I close it. And for, if anyone sees, I'm not like, if anyone sees me doing anything wrong with the templates, just jump in and let me know. Okay, so we've got for add and ads. So for each ad is gonna have, if we go back to our models, it's gonna have a title, a text, and an email. So we can create some HTML. So h2, and we'll do add.title, and then a paragraph, add.text, I think. And then for the email, we'll just do another, yeah, how about an A tag? An A tag that goes nowhere. Href. Add that email. All right, so if I save this, now I'm getting all these. So each one of these ads is, an object, a row in our database. We've grabbed it, and now we've turned it into HTML, basically. Are there any questions about that process? Okay, let's see. Let me think. Maybe we should take a break right now. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break right now. All right, cool. So yeah, just a refresher. So we have our ads app, and now we've got to the point where we have kind of a complete full stack application now. So we can take an incoming request to /ads/list, and that request will get routed ultimately to this view. This view will get called. It will grab all of the ad rows that we have in our database, which is based on our model right here. And it will grab all those ads and then kind of package them up in this dictionary. And we have this template And this render method will inject this stuff into our template, which is right here. And what actually ends up getting served up is just regular old HTML. So you can inspect that. Look at the elements. So there's no, template stuff here. This is just HTML. So what we actually get served is just normal HTML. So from my perspective as a client, I can't tell how this was generated. Like, as far as I know, someone hand coded all of this stuff. Okay, cool. So that's that. Now we want to do, so we can handle like viewing all the ads, but now we want to do is we want to actually be able to create an ad. So we want to have a route where we get a form, we fill in the form, and then the form gets passed to a view, the information gets pulled out, and then a new record is created in the database. So again, as always, there's a lot of steps that need to happen, but I'll just start here. And there's kind of a, there are a few ways that we could handle this. So we could have a different, a different route or a different method for everything. If we make a get request, if we make a post request, we can handle all those in different routes. But typically, for something like a form, we're going to want to double up on that. So we'll have one route, and then if it's a get request, we'll do one thing. If it's a post request, we'll do something else. So here we're only handling get requests, but this other route, excuse me, we'll handle both. So this will be called, let's see, create ad, and it takes in a request object as always. And for now, I'll just pass. I'm going to go ahead and build out the URLs as well. So we still have our top level URLs. So anything that's /ads is going to get handed off over to here, our app URLs. So I'm going to add another path. And I'm going to call this, instead of list, I'll call this new. And then what did I call this? Create ad. And I'll add this to the import. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and try going to, instead of list, I'll go to new, and I get an error. So it says the view ads.views.create ad, which is right here. It's ads.views.create ad. So this doesn't return an HTTP response object, which we saw from the signature right here. It has to return an HTTP response object. So none, so pass, if you do pass, it just returns none. So that none is not an HTTP response object. So we're gonna have to do something like this. But before we do that, we're gonna have to deal with two scenarios. So the first scenario, when I first go to new, I want to get an empty form. So if I want to get an empty form, that's just a regular get request. Then once I fill in the form and I submit it, that's going to be a post request. So the post request will be to the same route. You could arrange it differently, but this is just the typical pattern. So we're going to have to somehow determine if this request is a post request or a get request. And we can do that. So I'm going to print the request object. And I'll go back here. So I get this error still. Let's see. Let me try that one more time. Okay, so here's the string representation there. So it's a WSGI request thing, and it's get, and it's going to /add/new. So we're not seeing very much there, but we could, investigate. You could call dir on this and then see everything that it has. But I'll just tell you that there's a method. So if I make this request again and go here, should be able to see get. So request.method is get. So now I have a way to tell if it's what kind of request it is. So if request.method equals get, I'll do one thing. Elif request.method equals post, we'll do something else. So I'm not going to worry about handling errors or anything right now. Okay, so we have this, but so now we need to somehow serve up a form. So we could, just write a regular HTML document that has a form in it, and that would be fine. But Django has some conveniences built into it that we should use. So I'm going to create a new file here, just so I don't have to create a new file for the form, but you can, and that's the kind of convention. So forms, and that goes in here. So forms.py. So you've noticed that by default, when you just do Django admin create app, you get some things for free, like views, which you use, and admin, which we've used, and models, which you used, but you didn't get a urls.py here, and you also didn't get a form. So some stuff you get automatically, some other stuff, even stuff that you use frequently, you're gonna have to create, like the URLs in particular. All right, so forms. So let's look quickly at the Django documentation. Okay, so here's the Django documentation working with forms. There's a whole bunch of other documentation as well: forms API, form fields, validation. And this is actually pretty good reading, I would say, like general information. Same about get and post requests. So Django, as I mentioned, there's a few different ways where you can create a form. And we're going to do it basically this way first. So this is kind of the aside from hand doing it by hand yourself in the HTML document, this is kind of like an intermediate level of abstraction. So from Django.forms import form, we'll take a look at this. And class, we'll call it add form, and this is going to inherit from forms.form. So this is probably seems very familiar. It's like model. You import models, and then you inherit from models.model. You import forms, and you inherit from form.form. So the APIs of Django, Django tries to use the same basic API for everything, makes it convenient. Forms are typically going to be based on your database model anyway, right? So if I want to create a new ad, then the form has got to roughly be what the actual model is in the database. So there's opportunity there. Okay, and then here we're going to do the same thing. So whatever the field is, forms that blah blah blah. So there's some minor differences, and we'll take a look at them. So first, I'm going to split the models just so I can see what I have to have. So I'll have a title. That's going to be not models.char field, but forms.title. char field. And I think this also needs a max length. And then text. So this one is a little different. Mostly there's kind of a one-to-one correspondence between like the type here of the column and then whatever the form is, but that's not always the case. So this text field is an example of that. So instead of just being, a normal like text box, we want to have something larger because this could have, a paragraph or something in it. So in order to achieve that, you have to add something called a widget, which is basically just HTML. And you would figure this out just by reading the documentation. Widget equals, and then forms dot text area, I think. So now this is just going to look like a giant text box. And then email. That'll be forms. I think there's an email field. Very convenient. Let me just see widget. If you want to look at the widget, so a widget is Django's representation of an HTML input element. So it's just HTML. And here's an example. So this is the one that we're using right now. So car field, it's gonna insert some HTML. Okay. So there's a lot in the documentation. There's a lot of customization you can do. You can mostly use the defaults, but sometimes you can't. Okay. So I think that should be good for now. So we have our form. And this form, although we've written it as a class, is really just going to end up being HTML. It's going to end up being an HTML form, just like our model. This is really just SQL. This is just a create table statement, basically. Okay. So let's go back to the view. So if it's a GET request, then we're going to want to return HTML that has a form in it. So let's import the form from .forms, import, add form. Is that from? Okay, so the way this works is you're going to start off with an empty form, and then you're going to send that off. So return render request, and then the HTML, which we haven't written yet, adds slash new.html, and then whatever we want to pass in here. So this will be the add form. All right. So now I'm going to go create this new HTML document. So new.html. Create one. Add a new add. All right, so I'm going to go back over to here, and this should work now. Good. So this works, but we don't have the actual form yet. We don't have the form because we haven't injected it into the HTML. So we'll start with, it's called add form, I think we called it. And if I go here, I get the form, and I can see that this is just HTML. So the class that we wrote, this form class, gets just turned into this HTML. So we have all these, label, input, and so on, but it's not actually a form yet. It's just got the guts of a form. But we have to, so the documentation tells you, let me see, you have to actually, let me see, where does it say it? Let's see that. Anyway, I'm not sure where it says it, but it doesn't actually give you the full thing. So we have to actually wrap this in a form. So here's the example they give right here. So we'll go back to our HTML, and I'm going to do form. And I'll put this, whoops, I'll put this in here. And then I'm going to do method. Actually, I'll leave that there for now. Okay, the add form, and then we also need a submit button. That also does not come. Actually, I think it's do input. All right, so we go back here, I'll refresh this, and now we get a submit button, and you can see that the form is actually wrapped up as a form. So this is a real form now. And if I try to submit this, so first off, this is an email field. You can't tell. I'm gonna make this slightly that as P, I believe. So there's some customization you can do for all this stuff, and it's just a matter of like looking it up. Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of customization you can do here. Anyway, so we'll go back here. So we have the title, the text, and then the email. And if I go to submit this, I get this validation. So this is validation that's happening at the HTML level, because it knows that it's an email field, because Django told it was, because I told Django that it was. So notice the input type is email. So HTML has built-in validation for that. So it has to look like an email. So HTML thought it was fine, so it actually submitted it, but notice up here. So I clicked submit, and it added, so what is this thing called?
Is that a query
Query?
string?
Yes, exactly. So a query string. It starts with a question mark, and then it's a bunch of key value pairs separated by ampersands. So title is SDF. So this is what I wrote. Title, SDF, text, SDF, excuse me, and so on. So by default, it's going to make a GET request, and it's going to take all the information you put in the form and shove it up there in the URL. Sometimes that's fine. Often that's not, and that's not really what we want. So we're going to go here in the form and specify method equals post. So now I'll go here and submit that. And this time it actually kind of did what I wanted it to do, except we have a problem. So Django's throwing an error. It says forbidden, CSRF verification failed. And it gives us some, tells us some stuff, points us to some documentation. But CSRF we look again at the HTML, let me go back. If we look at the HTML, where is that? Yeah, so Django requires, so we'll look at the settings.py. So Django comes with all this stuff, including this CSRF view middleware. And middleware is just, you could think of this, these are just like filters that the request and response passes through. So you get an initial request, which we've seen, right? We've created them from scratch. It's just, it just has to follow the protocol of like, HTTP 1.0 get, slash, users, whatever it is. So that request object, Django adds a whole bunch of stuff. Django has a whole bunch of stuff on the request, and how most of that gets there is through middleware. So it takes a request and it's just going to pass it through. It's kind of like passing it through just a chain of functions or something. It's going to take that and it's going to do some checks on the request object and then maybe add some stuff or modify some stuff and just going to pass it down. So by the time it gets to our view function, it's gone through all of this request object has gone through all of that middleware. And part of the middleware that comes default with Django is this CSRF stuff. So it's going to check and make sure that you have a valid token if you're making a post request using a form. The reason it's doing that is because Django wants to make sure that it's not getting a form from somewhere else. So it's not just some random person submitting a form to your server. It's, I'm the application, I created this form and I sent it to you, and then you can send it back to me. So it's basically just like a stamp. It's a one-time value, and we'll see what it looks like. So to create that, it's very convenient. Django expects it. So we just add this CSRF. I forget what that's called. This will tell me CSRF tokens. All right. So we're still good. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to submit a new request. First off, we can see the form. So I made a GET request. I haven't submitted the form yet. We have this new thing. We have this new input field. And it's hidden, so it's not going to show up here on the HTML. But the name is CSRF middleware token, and the value is this big long string of gibberish. So this is just a one-time value that the application sent along with the form, so that when it gets it back, it knows that it itself sent it. All right, so now we have this, and we submit it, and we didn't get that error, so we're getting different errors. That's good. But we got a value error. So it says the view adds views create add didn't return an HTTP response object. We've seen that before. So if we look at our view function, create add. So the first time we make a GET request, that's good. So we make a GET request and we get that empty form. So that's working. The part that's failing now is this post request, because we've now set up the form to make a post request when it's submitted, and it's going to come right back here, and we're not doing anything with it. So now we need to do something with it. So what we need to do is get that form, pull everything out of it, and then create a new record in the database. So there's kind of a process for doing that with Django, Django forms. So we're going to start with if form. So the first time we sent an empty form. When we get the request, we're actually going to create a new instance of the form here, but we're going to use that post request object to do it. This is just how Django does it. So here's the empty form, and now we're going to kind of like recreate the filled out form here. So the way you do that is add form, and then you pass it in the request dot post, I believe. And this should be the body of the request. So if I make, let's make a new, let me look at the network tab. So here's the payload. This is the body. So we're going to get the CSRF middleware token, which we don't need to worry about. Django is going to worry about that for us. But we have the title and text and email. So that's the data we're getting in the body. So that's basically what this is. So we're going to fill out this form again with that information. And we can also print this, print, well. So once we have this, Django requires you basically to validate it. So you're gonna have to call this like validate. So if form dot is valid. This is just something you have to do, and we can take a look at it. We can tell from the, we'll just go into the source code real quick. So is valid, return true if the form has no errors, or false otherwise. So, you want to make sure the form doesn't have, so then, you should be able to tell if it's true, then you're good. The information is, what you're expecting, and you can then take it from there. If it's not, then you'll have to handle that error. We're not going to worry about that right now. But what happens is when you call that, you're going to have a new property available to you. Let's look at the documentation. Is valid. Okay, so it says whatever data submitted with the form, once it's been successfully validated by calling is valid, blah, blah, blah. The validated data will be in the form.cleaned data dictionary. And then this data will have been nicely converted into Python types for you. So again, this is work that the Django application is doing for you. So we call is valid to make sure, and then once we do that, we have access to this cleaned data. So let's take a look at that. Print form dot cleaned data. All right, so we'll make another request here. Okay, and if I come up, there we go. So here's is that dictionary. So now we have easy access to all of this stuff: title, text, and email. So let's just pull that out. So title equals form dot cleaned data title, and then you do the same thing. So text equals form dot cleaned data text, and then email form dot cleaned data email. And then once we have all that stuff pulled out, we can create an instance. So you can create an instance of our add here. So we do add dot objects dot create. And I can do title equals title, and text equals text, and email equals email. All right, so I'm going to try doing this. Go back here and title 1.1. So I get an error, but we'll see if we actually created something in the database. So for now, I'm going to jump over to the admin. And we'll take a look at our ads. So notice we have this new ad here. So 11. So that's the one that I just created. So this one was actually created. I still got an error because I am not returning an HTTP response object, but this code all executed successfully. So now what we want to do is, so someone has filled out the form, they submitted it, it's valid, it gets saved to the database. Now the typical pattern is that you redirect the user somewhere else. So there's a built-in way of doing that. So import render redirect. And there's also another helper which I'll use. So from Django.urls import reverse. And then I'm going to do return direct. And I'll explain this in 1 second. Let's go to list ads. Okay, and so what I'm saying here is I'm using some Django convenience stuff here. But what I'm saying is after you've inserted this into the database, I want you to redirect the user to this list ads. So you should see all of the list, all the ads, including the new one, hopefully. And the way I can do this if I add a third parameter here. So here is basically a route with a corresponding view function, and I can give this a name though. Name equals, and I'll just give it the same name, list. What did I call it? Yeah, I'll just call it list here. And then if I do that, then I can refer to it directly. So it'll basically call this. If I go back here, and this should all work now. Let me just, this will be called 2. If I submit, so I submitted, I can tell it's saved because it has the new record. I got redirected to this list view. So are there any questions about that?
Yeah, do you mind going over one more time the whole reverse, and then you put list, and then you redirected to, you added the URL pattern into, was it urls.py of your app?
Yeah, so the urls.py, so I'm basically giving this route a name here, so I can refer to this. It's also useful for links in the HTML. You can also use that there.
So if you didn't do that and you left list ads under after reverse, it would still work the same. It's just for convenience.
So if I didn't have this,
yeah, and then in reverse it was still list ads, that would still work.
I don't think so. Let me try that. I don't think it's going to call the method directly. Let's go to new. Yeah, reverse for list ads. There is another way. I mean, there are different things you could do. This is just the most convenient way to do it. And it's also pretty flexible, so you don't have to hard code any paths. So if I, decided to change my routes or something, I wouldn't
Yeah,
as
it would
long as
still work.
as long as
Yeah.
this stays the same, I could just change this in one place. So I can just call this list X, doesn't matter what I call it. As long as this, let me go back here, create a new one. So I think we're on 3 now. And that shows up. So the previous one that I did, it actually did save. So it went through again here successfully, but then through an error here. So there's a lot of steps involved, but I think once you go through this process a few times, you'll start seeing it's almost like like exercise or something. And then for the form, so that's the one. I think I won't show you the other way, but it doesn't really matter. So there's there's something called a model form, which you can look into, and I think the README for today shows it as well. But there's like a more abstract way where there's a little bit less work you have to do. But that's the basic idea. All right, I will stop recording here.